Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is the State of the Union address. George Bush will be coming to you soon to tell you about the State of the Union. I'm kind of interested to see how many standing ovations he will receive. I'm not really sure what he wants to tell you about the state of our union. I can tell you one thing, it's in a disarray. So the State of the Union, there is really a danger, unless we do something about it. I don't know how long we can hold on to this union that was supposed to be from the beginning where checks and balances and the Constitution supposed to have given the citizens of the United States certain protection, but it looks like we don't have those protections anymore. And I don't know what is he going to say now about what we have done in Iraq, the lies that he had told us of why he went to war against Iraq. 90% of people in the United States know now that he lied. Not that he had the wrong information. See, at first, people thought that he had the wrong information and that's why he went there. And when he said that was the intelligence I had, people believed him. But you do know, well, at least 90% of you know that he lied. He knew. He did not receive bad intelligence. They fabricated the intelligence. They fabricated intelligence at the Pentagon in the Office of Special Plans under Douglas Feith, who was under Paul Wolfowitz, who was in turn under Rumsfeld. And they were all under Dick Cheney. So, the State of the Union, I'm not really sure. I believe he will be standing alone. I don't think he's going to have too many people agreeing with him. Now he's talking about sending more troops, which we already sent more troops. And if we get engaged with this thing with Iraq, where Israel is trying desperately to drag us into, then we will be seeing a hell of a lot more than what we're seeing now. The war, ladies and gentlemen, is costing us $8 billion a month. $8 billion a month. That's a lot of money just in 1 month to pay for a war that we had no place to be at to start with. $8 billion a month can put every homeless person in the United States in a good home. It can offer health care for the rest of the population here in the United States for the rest of their lives. It can do a lot. It can feed the hungry around the world. It can do a hell of a lot in the Palestinian territories where we can have once and for all put a stop to the bloodshed and to Israel's carnage against the Palestinians. $8 billion a month, ladies and gentlemen, is a lot of money, and all that money is coming out of your pocket. And by the way, it's not that we make that kind of money in the United States. No, we are borrowing that money that we are putting down the drain. We're burning that money. Basically, that's what it boils down to. We are burning that money, and money that we are borrowing, where your children and their children will work for the rest of their lives just to pay off the debt that George Bush had put this country in. This man has to be impeached. We cannot go for 2 more years of this man. If we want this war to stop, if we want whatever is happening in between Iran and the United States, all the talk about going to war, if we want it to stop, we've got to impeach this man. This man cannot keep going with the policy that he's going with. He's listening to the wrong people. He's doing Israel's dirty work for it. We had no business of going to Iraq, but Israel did. Israel planned the destruction and the removal of Saddam Hussein from power. And that's what we have to understand, that we are there for Israel. How did we get this way? How did a lot of Americans feel that that we owe Israel something? How did we get that way? With us tonight is a gentleman who had been on the show before, and he will help us go through this. How did the United States become a country that has Israel's interest on top of its agenda, even above and beyond our own interests, our own people's interests? How did we get that way? And one who will help us go through this is Charles Carlson of WeHoldThisTruth.org. Welcome to the show, Charles.
Thank you, Dr. Tillawi. I'm happy to be back.
Thank you. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a year or so, and your analysis of what's going on is very astute, and I agree with you. I don't think the president is going to get many standing ovations, but he still has 30 or so % of the American people who think that he's right. And in spite of the fact that, as you put it, 90% know he lied about the war. So how can this be that you have more people who, 3 times as many people who thinks he told the truth who are who still support him?
Right.
And that's
now,
what we're going
to before we go there, something happened, and I wanted to ask you how did we get to this point? A friend, an acquaintance, made a comment that we all going to burn in hell because we want to destroy Israel. And I said, what do you mean we all? She said, you, the Muslims, the Arabs, you all going to burn in hell because you want to kill the Jews, they're God's people, and you want to kill them. And I said, well, where did you hear about this? She goes, the pastor at church told her that we are to love Israel. Can you, Chuck, tell me, how did this person become, or thinking that if you don't like the state of Israel, that you're going to burn in hell? How did that come about?
Well, if you look at Christians in America, 85% of the people in this country say that they're Christians. So that comes out to be about 240 million people by my arithmetic. And about half of them don't go to church. But still, they say that they are Christians. That's what they call themselves when they're asked to pick it out on a chart. And of those, about 1/3 are today referred to in some context as Christian Zionists. Now, this word is kind of a stretch because it's a word that wasn't even used 10 years ago, but it began to be used in Israel. Ariel Sharon popularized the word. Our organization started to use the word a number of years ago, but another term for it is Judeo-Christian, or some people say the Christian right. And the number of people who make up what is generally referred to as the Christian right are probably about 1/3, or about 80 million Americans, or about 1/3 of that total of 240 million people who say they're Christians. The rest are Catholics and mainline Protestants, and then other assorted religions. But within that area, that's a huge voting bloc. And the people who make up, who are referred to as Christian Zionists, have in the past called themselves evangelicals. It's been another term for it. or various terms are used, and the largest group within that is the Southern Baptist Convention, which when he was a president, James Earl Carter was a member. He was a deacon on the board of membership of his local church of the Southern Baptist Convention. And I was the same. I was also a Baptist deacon in my training. So I know about what Jimmy Carter was taught and what he was asked to teach others when he was in the Southern Baptist Convention 15 or 20 years ago. And it's this one-third of the American public who are today referred to as the Christian right. It would be very nice to say that they're all villains and that the problem is that they shouldn't exist. But the truth is, if you go within the evangelical churches, you find some very fine people. In fact, you find a lot of the salt of the earth of Christianity are inside of those churches. It is not the people who are there that are the problem, but it is what's taught. And in order to find out what has been taught in this movement, which started roughly 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago, in order to find out what started in that movement, you have to go back and look at what is taught in those churches called evangelical churches. And we do that. That's what we do. We study what they were taught, why it was taught to them, how this happened, and how it grew. But in general, Dr. Tillawi, this group, the evangelical group or the Christian right, was very small up until about 1948. And then something happened. Israel became a political state. And that was a catalyst that caused a lot of the growth within the evangelical movement. And then the explosion that took place has happened since about 1967, the Six-Day War, when Israel has been elevated to sort of a position of a god for many, not all, but for many of the leaders of these churches. So that when you look at the people who make up the so-called Christian right, you find people like Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, John Hagee is a big name right now, who calls himself a Christian Zionist and has just started an organization called Christians United for Israel. And it has a lot of membership, and they absolutely swear that the land of the Middle East belongs to Israel. They're not just talking about the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. They really are talking about anything in the Middle East that Israel wants. And they take this back to what they say is biblical, and what we say is heresy or apostasy, and is in no way biblical.
Chuck, you are reading, the Bible. Is there different types of Bibles out there? Because, aren't you reading the same Bible that they're reading?
Yes, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, the evangelical movement started out using a King James version of the Bible, just like many people do today, and many people swear that this is the only authentic Bible. Whether it is or not doesn't matter. But back in about 1908, in exactly 1908, a man named Cyrus I. Scofield rewrote this Bible. And he took an authorized King James version of the Bible, and he wrote into it introductions, annotations, subject chain references, I'm reading from it, and such word changes as the text as will be helpful to the reader. So he made little small changes in the Bible, but the big changes were made in interpretations, which were known as footnotes, and were added to the end of the Bible. And this so-called Scofield Reference Bible was first published in 1908, before the Balfour Declaration. And then it's been revised every few years ever since then. And you have to look at who owns it. It has been owned from the very beginning by an organization called Oxford University Press, which has been a very pro-Zionist movement, going all the way back to the days of Lord Balfour and before. In fact, to the days of Herzl and others. And so these changes that were put into the Bible have all happened in the last 100 years, and it is these footnotes that your friend is talking about. If you were to ask her where she got her information about Israel, she would resort to finally to telling you statements that come not out of the text of the Bible, but out of footnotes that were written
Okay, Chuck,
in the Oxford Bible.
Charles, just to help our viewers, what we are looking at on the screen now is a slide that says the Scofield Reference Bible 1909, and it starts with the Palestinian Covenant gives. Can you tell us about that particular slide? What are we reading here and what's going on with it?
Well, what page is it?
It looks like I can't see a page.
Okay.
But it says Deuteronomy 30, 3-5.
Okay. The Palestinian Covenant did not exist in 1908 because the country of Palestine, there was no country of Palestine per se. So what that slide tells you is that the author in 1908 was predicting a coming Palestine, and he was predicting a coming state of Israel. And the primary places that this occurs is found in the book of Genesis, in the 12th chapter, and this is the basis upon which the state of Israel claims the lands that it has in Palestine. And it's where Abraham came to the man, was come to by God, and God made a promise to him of land, and promised to bless him, and then promised that he would bring forth to him a blessing to all the families of the earth. Christians, Jews, and Islam all respect this passage that Abraham, between God and Abraham, they all say it happened. But what the evangelicals say is that this was a promise of land that was given to the people then that applies to the state of Israel now. And, of course, what the Christians have traditionally said is that this is a promise that God made to Abraham, that he would bring forth a Messiah for all the people called Jesus, who is later called Jesus. So what's happened is the passage of the Bible that has been respected for all these years by all Christians has been reinterpreted to be a land promise, a land grant promise, promising it to the state of Israel, a state which didn't even exist in 1908 when this Bible was written. And that is all taken from footnotes written in the bottom of page 19 of the Scofield Reference Bible, published in 1967, in which it talks about persecution of Jews. It talks about the rights that God's promise of the land to the Jews. It says that it was promised to the Jews. And it talks about punishment for any country that does not respect the right of the Israelis to occupy the land of Palestine. And that is very vivid in these footnotes. It's a very vivid proclamation that says any country that fails to bless the state of Israel will be cursed by God. And those promises were written before there was a state of Israel. In fact, at the time of Abraham, the subject of these verses, that there was no word called Israel. Israel was a grandson of the man named Abraham. So these distortions have been written in, and the basis of it all occurs on this page 19 of the Scofield Reference Bible in the 1967 version. Is that
so
clear?
Yes, it's very clear now. Definitely there was no Israel when those words were written, because Israel is Jacob, who's the son of Isaac.
Right.
And
grandson of Abraham.
Grandson of Abraham, exactly. And in the Bible, there is you can probably come up with about 6 or 7 different identities for the word Israel. it did not only mean the son, the grandson of Abraham, but it also meant other meanings. We're not going to get into that because that's not the subject tonight. But now, since this was done in 1909, or it was commissioned, somebody commissioned Scofield in 1908, and they published it in 1909. So who did that and why?
Okay, actually, it took him longer than that. What he did, he was a he was a renegade pastor who had a criminal background, and he'd at least spent time in jail. And he was not a theologian. We think there's reason to believe that he was involved with a man named Samuel Untermeyer, and it's pretty evident that he was. And in any case, someone paid the money to send him to Lake Geneva, Switzerland, and he spent actually 4 years writing footnotes to the Bible. Now, Scofield's history was he was a professional forger, and he'd been in jail for it, and he'd gotten away with a lot of forgeries that he didn't go to jail for. So what he really did is he forged the Bible, and he stole the footnotes from someone who was 50 years before him, who was in England, a man named John Nelson Darby, who had considerably financial support in England. And he had tracks and trails that went back to very powerful people in England. So what happened is Mr. Scofield borrowed the information conveniently from a predecessor. He then got someone to finance him. He went to Switzerland and rewrote the Bible on yellow sheets of paper. And then someone else, who we don't know who, introduced him to this prestigious publishing company in England that didn't publish in the United States at the time, and they didn't even publish things that Americans wrote. They had no American publishers on their list. But they did choose to publish this book published by the jailbird, who stole the information, obviously, from someone else and didn't give him credit. There's no credit given to John Nelson Darby. And they published this Bible then over his own name. And then for the next 50 years, he was listed as the editor of the Bible, even though he'd been dead for 40 of those 50 years. And he still is listed as the editor of the Scofield Reference Bible, which is a very successful Bible. His name appears.
The one who commissioned him is Rothschild, who was financing the Zionist movement at the time. If you remember, in 1898, I believe, when the Zionist movement started, they wanted to have a homeland, a Jewish homeland somewhere, and Palestine was one of the countries that they have named. And so this man Scofield was commissioned by Rothschild to basically start a culture, start teaching Americans about Israel. It's like something to come, or not just Americans, Christians, mainly Christians, to start this subculture of looking at Israel and the Jewish people as actually, God's people. And I've heard this so many times. Do you have any information on that?
Yes. You're right to the extent that the Rothschild family was very influential in the Oxford Press, and that it's very likely that that's exactly what happened. And it's close enough. It's close enough so that it's a good speculation that that's exactly what happened. And I personally think that something like that is exactly what happened. But it's more important, it stands on its own, that he did create a subculture. That's exactly what was done. A subculture within Christianity that suddenly believed that the state of Israel was sort of a God figure. And then you see why, in 1948, when the state of Israel actually came along, through the effort of Lord Balfour and Chaim Weizmann, and of course before them, their predecessors in the World Zionist Movement, you can see why the followers of this theology suddenly thought that God was returning, that the state of Israel was the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, and it was being fulfilled in front of their eyes. And so then it became alive to them, and it became very easy for charismatic leaders like Jack Hayford is a current example. John F. Walvoord, head of the Dallas Theological Seminary, who taught this to the Southern Baptists in the seminaries, for these people to make a very glamorous case for God working right in front of their eyes and bringing back the state of Israel to be the new kingdom where Christ would return at some time soon, where there'd be a battle called Armageddon, where there would be a new world created, and a millennial reign, and of course a rapture where all those present who believed in Christ would be taken away to heaven. So this became a very wonderful imagination fulfilled when the state of Israel was created by the English and by the U.S. through the mechanism of the Balfour Declaration, the support of people like Samuel Untermeyer in the United States, and Justice Brandeis. And by the way, Justice Brandeis made a statement. He said that in referring to one of the predecessors of Cyrus I. Scofield, he referred to this man, his name happened to be Blackstone. He referred to him as the founder of Zionism, and he believed that these Christian leaders who got this idea actually propagated Zionism more effectively than the Jews themselves.
Okay.
And they did.
Charles, stay with me. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want you to tell me how.
To finish this, and now there's 80 million of them.
Right. That's what I wanted to talk to you about when we come back from the break. I want to see how can we talk to these people and what can we tell them. But we'll do that after we come back from the break. We will be right back.
Thanks.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are speaking with Charles Carlson of We Hold These Truth. You can get more information on this at www.whtt.org. WeHoldTheseTruth.org. Charles, now we're not talking about, you see, 30 years ago, we basically had Pat Robertson was there, and he was more of the extremist of the extremists. And then we had, the James, what's his name, Jimmy and Tammy Faye Baker. And then now we have hundreds of them on the airwaves. But these people 30 years ago, they used to be a very small minority, and then all of a sudden they are 1/3 of the population here. How can we talk to 1/3 of the population? I mean, we're talking about 80 million people. How can we talk to 80 million people and say, you know what, you have been studying the wrong information? How can you do that?
Well, what we did, of course, we started a project which dramatizes how strongly we feel about this, where we actually go to churches, huge mega churches with enormous numbers in them, 20,000 or more, and to large gatherings such as the Southern Baptist conventions. And we arrange vigils at those places where we carry signs and literature and actually challenge them on what they believe to their very face. And so that's one way that we dramatize it, and we started this project almost 3 years ago called Project Straightgate, that's been to some 50 of these conventions. But every person, every individual, needs to have some idea of what you say when someone comes out of one of these groups and says, why are you here? What is it that you want? Because I want to stress this very clearly. Within those 80 million people, and that's only a big guess as to how many there are, some of them are Catholics, some of them are stretched into places that you never expect, but expanded very broadly. But within the evangelical churches, known as the Christian right churches, this is where you have the really high concentrations of people who believe this way. And so you have to train yourself a little bit to understand what I've just told you here. First of all, that the story about Abraham means something to Christians that they're forgetting. It means that it was a promise of a Messiah. And actually, to talk to them, you actually have to be able to refer to Christ's words a little bit and have a few little things that you know that are biblical and scriptural that you can point out to them. If you talk to them simply on secular grounds, you have a hard time. But there's a litmus test, Dr. Tillawi, that we actually use. We ask, do you believe that the state of Israel is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy? And about 100% of the people who are among those 80 million do believe that.
Okay. Well, then what do you come back with?
Start out by a very simple question. If you don't remember anything else tonight, remember that. Ask your friend, do you think that Israel is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy?
And if they say yes?
Then they are probably in this camp.
Okay.
Of the Christian right camp. Now, what should they say? Well, the right answer should be, no, I really don't think so. I think that the fulfillment of biblical prophecy in the Old Testament is Jesus Christ. And if someone said that, and you say, well, you must be a Christian, because that is what Christians believe. They believe that the Old Testament was fulfilled in the coming of a new covenant for new people led by Jesus Christ. And if you put another party alongside of Jesus Christ and say Israel is a co-God along with Jesus, then you believe in multiple gods, and you have confusion right away. And none of the people in the evangelical church would tell you they believe in multiple gods. They all believe in the deity of Jesus Christ. So just to ask them if they think Israel is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy gets you started on the right foot.
Now let me ask you this. Now, if they say yes, Israel is the fulfillment, and now is Israel, the state of Israel today? Do you think it's a religious country? Is a religious nation?
No, and that's a good response that you would take right back to them. You've got to right head on. Well, do you think Israel is a religious country? 85% of the people there say that they're not religious. And why do you think this? And most of the people who think this really cannot justify it. They cannot give clear reasons why they think it. They give a basket full of reasons. They recite a lot of related scriptures and so on. But what you need to do always is to say, well, where did the state of Israel get the right? This is your next question. Where did the state of Israel get the right to take the land that the Palestinians have occupied for a long time? And then they'll say, well, they got that when God promised the land to Abraham.
Now, he promised the land to the seed of Abraham, correct?
Right.
And I mean, there's no question about it in Christianity or even in Islam. There's no question about it because it's also in the Quran. Now, the seed of somebody is someone who is a descendant of that particular person. Now, the Jews in the world, worldwide, not just in Israel, worldwide, what are they? Are they the seed of Abraham?
Well, that's where this takes you, because there is not anyone in Israel who can show that they have any lineage to Abraham. Most of them came from Europe. A few were there, but even those who were there can't show that they had DNA from Abraham, that they had
right.
any.
I mean, you can just take a look at them and see that they did not come from the Middle East, because normally people who come from that part of the world, the majority of them look like me. And so, I mean, I'm sure God also knows who are the seed of Abraham, and he's not just going to let these people come from Europe and give him the land. If this is, prophecy, and if this is fulfillment of what's in the Bible, I'm sure God knows the history of these people and that they did not come from the seed of Abraham. Charles, I'll tell you what, stay with me. We have some people on the phone wanted to talk to you, so hang in there. We're going to the phones with Tom on line 1. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
You hear me?
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, I know you're all talking about Israel right now, but I wanted to comment on the State of the Union address that Bush is going to be talking tonight. And what I think that's happened is that, well, I'm concerned that we're talking about putting democracy or trying to help build a democracy in Iraq when we don't even have a successful democracy here in the United States. And I'm talking about the election of 2000 that was highly suspicious what happened in Florida. And I think we had a rerun of that in 2008, or 4 rather. So we have a lot of problems here with people voting and things like that. But Bush wasn't prepared for the job intellectually to be the president. And so the people around him, they've done an end run. And I'm talking about Karl Rove and Dick Cheney. And they're influencing him a lot more than they should be able to. If he was intelligent, if he was an intellectual that did his own homework and really was intellectually curious and did nuance, somebody like Harry Truman, for example, he might take their advice, but he'd make his own decisions. But this guy's being manipulated by Cheney and by Rove, and Cheney and Rove could not have appealed to the majority of the people. If Bush did in the election, I mean, it was a 50-50 split, but he's popular. He was 50% of the people voted for him, but he's very shallow, and that's the kind of guy it seems like that's elected to the presidency these days. But anyway, the State of the Union, like you started out the program tonight, he's got us in a big jam over there in Iraq. And he's looking at Iran now, too, and I don't know what's going to become of it. And I guess I want to ask you, I think that Osama bin Laden probably likes the idea of draining our treasury on this war. And talking about the religion, your guest is saying that 85% of the people in the United States claim to be Christians. Well, I'm in the 15% that I don't claim to be a Christian, but I think that this religion, whether it's Islam or Christianity, is a big problem, because I believe in live and let live, and if somebody doesn't agree with me, if I'm not a Shiite or I'm not a Sunni, I don't want to kill the guy. So
right.
I don't know, what are your thoughts about Islam and Christianity and the whole thing about religion? And thank you very much. Enjoy your program.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Charles, let's bring in what Tom talked about, which is what is happening now. As you know, that the majority of those people we are talking about actually voted for George Bush. The Christian right or the Christian wrong, as I call them, is what actually put George Bush in the White House. And then you had these Zionists, who are also referred to as neocons. The majority of them are Jewish, and basically they got in the right positions to execute this war that is basically, it has nothing to do with taking democracy over there, because we are destroying democracy. And before we go on that, I want to just mention something about him mentioning Osama bin Laden. I don't believe Osama bin Laden is alive. I think he died a long time ago. And what's amazing now, every time we see George Bush in trouble, before we used to see Osama bin Laden coming up with all these video clips on Al Jazeera. Now we see Ayman al-Zawahiri doing the same thing. Anytime George Bush needs help, you have Al-Qaeda putting out these tapes, and Ayman al-Zawahiri saying to George Bush, why did you send 20,000? You should have sent your whole army so we can kill him. Now, you know, Will, that if Al-Qaeda was fighting, the last thing they want to do is for you to send more troops, because that's going to mean a lot more people will die. And I don't really believe that Al-Qaeda is fighting us in Iraq either. I believe the Iraqis are fighting us in Iraq. We don't want to say, we always keep referring to them as insurgencies. That is the Iraqi resistance, period. Iraqis who don't want us in Iraq. But let's go back to what Tom talked about, the State of the Union, and how did we get here? How did the Christian right elected George Bush and put their own people in control? How did that happen?
Well, what happened was George Bush found a way to ingratiate himself to the Christian right by saying that he was one of them and that he followed these principles and ideas. And so this is what got him the votes. He obtained the votes by presenting himself as a member of the Christian right, when in fact his supporters and friends were very wealthy people, including the neocons, and who you pointed out, and a lot of other people. He politically used the Christian right to get him in. And he's continuing to be supported by the Christian right. And what the question you must ask, if you, and by the way, I don't disagree with any of the things that were said by Tom or yourself, but my response to this is that the thing you must ask people who think they're supporting Mr. Bush, you should say, well, you must ask him, how do you square the killing of people in a place like Palestine or Iraq with what Jesus says in the Bible, in the New Testament, where he says you must love your brother, even love your enemy, turn the other cheek? Where does Jesus ever say that it's okay to kill Osama bin Laden or Saddam Hussein's grandson, who was killed while we were looking for him? Where in the New Testament, and this is the way you talk to evangelicals, where in the New Testament do you find Jesus saying it's okay because you're a Christian to do this? This is the question that has to be presented to the evangelical. He has to be asked about his own book, which is the New Testament, and that's the most important question.
Okay,
to ask
Charles,
a simple question.
Charles, we are really saying that there's about 80 million people out there who were, I'm trying to find a nice way here. We're insulting them when we say you were duped into believing this stuff. But is that, do we have that many people who are naive? How do you explain that? Can't people read the Bible and figure out what it's saying? Can't people see that the Bible did not say, when it says Israel, it did not mean the state of Israel that was created in 1948? Do we have... we don't have a good Christian education going on in our churches? Is that what it boils down to? Why do we have this?
That's a good part of it. Let's take an example we know about for sure, a person we can talk about. Jimmy Carter. You brought his book. It's a pretty good book. And the new book does say that the Israelis are responsible. It does say the wall is wrong. It does talk about the persecution and the imprisonment. But if you looked at the same man who 20 years ago was a member of the Southern Baptist Convention and a deacon, like myself, in a Southern Baptist church, if you look at that man, and at the book he wrote then, back in 1993, when he wrote another book called The Blood of Abraham, none of these things were in it. He did not acknowledge and recognize any of the abuse, significantly, of the abuse of the Palestinians, the abused Palestinians by the Israelis. So the difference was, what happened to James Earl Carter? Well, one thing that happened is he came out of the Southern Baptist Church in the year 2000. So here's a very influential man who was not much help 20 years ago and is a huge help today because he changed. So we have we have people like that among these 80 million people. They're not all foolish. They're not all totally misled. Most of them are in their church for social reasons, and they go along with it without really arguing, but they're influenced by it.
Now,
And
Charles,
what Bible Indian churches can be changed.
Okay, what Bible did you study when you were a Baptist?
The same ones. I studied the text of the material given. I had a King James Version Bible, and the part
and you used the Scofield Reference Bible.
Well, I didn't happen to have one, but I had other references Bibles that were like it. There are others that are like it.
Okay.
And I heard all of this talk, and it didn't exactly make sense to me. But you see, my church was my culture, and that was where I raised my children. And it had the cultural qualities that you wanted for your children and for yourself and your families. We went there 4 times a week. It was part of our lives. This is what you have to realize with these people. They are in a cultural thing, and many of them, if they were asked to explain why they believe what appears to be total nonsense, they would not be able to explain it to you. If you sat down and asked them, who would Jesus balm, they would say, well, he wouldn't balm anyone. And then they would say, but Saddam Hussein was a ruthless killer, and we had to take care of him. And what usually happens when you're talking to one is then you tell them all that you know about Saddam Hussein, and you get off on a secular realm. Whereas what you have to do with one of these evangelicals, like I was, is you have to say, but let's talk about your Bible. What does your Bible say about killing Saddam Hussein's grandson?
Okay.
You see, what does your own, the one you have in your hand, what does that say about killing Saddam?
Okay.
Don't read me the footnotes. Don't tell me what Mr. Scofield interpreted. Tell me what the words are that Jesus left for you to believe.
Now, Charles,
this is the way you have to talk to them.
Okay. The question that kind of presents itself here is, why aren't we seeing other Christians who don't believe in this dispensationalist theory, etc., why we're not seeing them challenging, since it is not just a religion anymore, a religious issue anymore. It is not you have your religion, I have my religion, and let's just play happy here. It is these people with these ideas are basically putting people in the White House that would end up affecting everybody's lives. Why aren't we seeing a debate in the country that, look, your religious belief, it's yours and we respect it, but we can't run country's policies after that?
The answer to that is the Zionist media loves the evangelical movement. It loves the Christian Zionist movement. So that's why all of these people have this marvelous television time that you have a hard time paying for, I'm sure. But they have unlimited amounts of this. They have networks of their own. The Zionist movement helps spread this material. But what is happening is the debate is going on. In the last election, the congressional election, about 20% of the evangelical vote switched and voted for Democrats just as a reflex. They just voted against Bush. A fairly good percentage of the Christian right voters changed in the last congressional election. And there are people arguing and debating. I'm doing it. And I came right out of that movement.
Right.
James Earl Carter came out of that movement.
Okay.
So there are people coming out and doing it.
That's fine. That's fine. On an individual basis, there's a lot of people who are doing it. But why aren't we finding, let's say, the Catholic Church coming out and saying and debating this issue with the evangelists? Why wouldn't? Because if that happens, then it will bring it down to the streets, and it becomes a debate where people can't. I mean, we don't have to argue, but we can teach each other and we can listen to each other. Why aren't the big churches stepping in and saying, "Whoa, wait a minute, this is wrong. Either you're wrong or we're wrong." Why there is no religious debate in the United States?
I guess.
And I'm talking about, when I said religious debate, I mean Christian religious debate.
Exactly. The Catholics debating, the Methodists debating, the Lutherans should be debating, the Episcopalians should be debating. I can only tell you these are big, sluggish, slow to move, and they are moving. Some are moving. And Carter himself, and this is not to make a hero out of a man who I don't hold as a hero, but who I appreciate what he's doing right now. James Earl Carter, I appreciate what he's doing. He's actually gone in, and they have started a movement within a whole bevy of Baptist churches that are not part of the Southern Baptist Convention, which have about 20 million members, and they're seeking to have a convention of those, and you can bet that if they have a convention of those, that we want to be there to help influence them. And that you can bet that Mr. Carter has an idea that he wants these churches to see what he has seen, he wants them to be influenced by what he's been influenced by, because he did make a change in his life.
Right.
And unfortunately, he's quite an old fellow. He may not last another 20 years. But this can happen. It is happening. It must happen. And changing the evangelical church is the job of the other churches. Our job at We Hold These Truths, Straight Gate Ministries, is to bring it their attention and show them why it happened and how they can debate properly, how they can go and debate against evangelicals. And we can't get debates. We try to get debates with leaders of evangelical churches, and we rarely get them. But we are getting discussions and dialogue with some of the leaders now. And that's starting to happen. We can see the change going on. And we can tell from our telephones and the messages we receive messages from people who teach in seminaries that at one time were on the side of the Zionist movement, and have professors within them who are now turning away from that.
Now, with the time we have left, go ahead and tell our viewers what is your church or your organization is working on, the activities that you're working on, and what you're trying to do. We have a couple of minutes left.
Okay, where We Hold These Truths, our website is WHTT, for WeHoldTheseTruths.org. It of course came out of the Declaration of Independence and has foundation there. And we have a project called Project Straight Gate that actually is setting up units all over the country. We have several units and several being set up right now to go out and challenge big evangelical churches and other churches, Catholic churches, Presbyterian churches, in the street, and tell them that this is a serious matter. It's a matter of life and death. We write editorials and we publish those, and the text of what I would like to have everyone see is available on our website in a audiovisual presentation that is called The Christian Zionist Roots. And you can go to the website and find it and listen to it, and it presents this program in a succinct way. And our effort is then to influence people within these churches to move out of the evangelical movement and to find someplace else and to bring about change from within.
Okay, very good. Charles, as usual, thank you for coming on the program. It has been a pleasure having you on.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we only have probably about a minute left. With all due respect to everyone out there and their religious beliefs, what we are talking about here really has nothing to do with the Christian belief or with the Bible. You know, everybody is reading the same Bible, but as you know, the interpretation of that Bible can be different with different faiths or different churches. The subject that we've talked about is a particular book, which is the Scofield Reference Bible, and where they had taken things that meant one thing at one time and wrote it in a different way to mean something else completely. And case in point here is what when the Bible talks about Israel in this reference Bible, they have got it to mean the state of Israel, and as if the state of Israel, which was created back in 1948 as a political entity, as if it was God's fulfillment. And of course, reading that the footnotes with this particular Bible, it makes your pastor or your a church probably teaching. Whoever's teaching at your church probably teaching that stuff, which is completely not the Bible, not what it said in the Bible, but the footnotes is what they changed. We'll be back in 5 minutes with Anissa Abdul Fattah with the Muslim American Women Association. See you then.
Hi, this is Christy Carline with Miles Perrette Cancer Services, and I'm the